Imagine you are hired to design the core database for Netflix, where you need to manage user accounts, individual viewer profiles, video content, and viewing history more effectively. I will walk you through stakeholder interviews with the product team, with the tech lead, with the architecture, and all the related stakeholders. And your task will be to extract requirements from them, get everything ready that's required for designing an ERD. Now, before we jump into designing our database model, let's get back to business. And by business, I mean, let's get back to the foundations. Now, if you're new to these terms, watch every concept carefully. I have chunked it into smaller portions and gave my best to make it as detailed as possible. And if you already know the concepts, you can directly move to the designing part. But I strongly suggest you to watch the foundation, like making it as a refresher, or even you might get a new perspective you never knew or you were never exposed to. And this is beginner friendly. No worries. If you have never designed an ERD or you do not know anything about it, I made sure that at the end of watching this video, everyone can design an ERD by themselves. So, hello everyone, this is Isa, the Data AI Engineer, and today we are discussing on designing an ERD for the Netflix. Now, let's move on to the basics. So, before we move on to the basics and all the stuff, let's have a small clarification. So, what is an ERD? So, ERD stands for Entity Relationship Diagram. So, the term itself, the definition itself, have three terms: entity, relationship, and diagram. So that means we'll have some entities, we'll have some relationship that define them, and when we combine them together, we get a diagram, which is called entity relationship diagram. Now, let's brainstorm on what is required. So, before we move on to designing, let's think, what do we need? So as I already mentioned, it's entity, relationship, and diagram. That means we'll be needing entities, we'll be needing a relationship, and we will be needing something which will be used to create the diagram. So let's get to some basics. So now to draw the ERD, the things that we require is we need the business requirement. As I mentioned earlier, that we have some interviews taken from the stakeholders. Now that's your information, that's your data, and from that we need to extract business requirement, and then we need to make some business rules, then we need our entities, then we establish the relationship between the entities. Now, to discuss the basics, starting from business rule, let's go to the slide. This is the slide where we'll be focusing on discussing the terms, the concept that will be required for designing an ERD. So let's move on with some foundations. So the things that we'll be discussing is what is an entity, what is relationship, what kind of relationship can entities have, some business requirements, some business rules, some business logic. So let's move on. So as starting of the video, what I mentioned is ERD stands for Entity Relationship Diagram. So imagine you are building a house. Now you are discussing the concept of your house with me. Now to visualize the type of house that you need, you'll be giving me information, right? You'll be showing me pictures, you'll be showing me the design. So nowadays the vision board, the mood board are really famous. What do you do in those vision boards? You collect the pictures of your vision so that you can visualize on what it is that you want. So similarly, in the case of designing or building a house, we'll be needing a blueprint like that will explain the stakeholders or the engineers who are working to design your house into conceptualizing what it is that you actually want. So you might want a 2 BHK house, and where you say that right beside my bedroom I want a library, and I'll have another room for guest room and one kitchen, one hall. That's the kind of idea that you'll get, and you'll sketch it out in a paper as a blueprint, right? And what does that helps someone looking at it? No, it will help them to know that, okay, oh, this is the type of house that you want to design, right? So similarly, in the case of database, before we build a database, we need to understand what we are storing, how everything relates. And this is where entity relationship diagram comes into play. It's a blueprint created during the database planning and designing stage to visualize the database structure. Simple enough, right? Now let's move on. Now, as I mentioned earlier, now when we have discussion interviews with a client, we get information from them. And during the information, they decide what kind of system that they want. For example, as I explained earlier, let's take the same example of designing the house. So when you were explaining the type of house that you want to your engineers, what you said was you needed a room, and beside your room you wanted a library. So, and let's say as an engineer, I forgot the fact that you wanted library just beside your room, and I constructed a house where just beside your room I keep the kitchen. Now, would you like that? No. Similarly, in the case of database designing, when we are extracting information from the client itself, what we want is we want to define some rules. And where that rule comes from, it comes from the client itself. So business rule equals what must be true. It defines constraint, it defines policies, it defines what's allowed or not. It defines certain conditions, and it comes directly from the client, not from the developers. So, for example, if you're designing a university system, the client wants that if a student is enrolled, you cannot enroll them again. So what does that mean? It means that there is a constraint that a student cannot be enrolled twice, and you need to ensure that while designing the system that you'll have that rule done. So these are the statements that your system must always follow. Now moving on. So in the business logic, now these are certain logic that helps your system to act like a system. So you have your rules. Now you want to implement some logics to define those rules. So business logic is simply the implementation of business rules inside a system or application. So business rules define what must be true for a system, and business logic defines how the system enforces the rules. Now, so let's move on to entity. So what is an entity? So entity can be anything. It can be a place, it can be object, it can be event or concept. Anything can be an entity. It's basically a noun. So another thing that you must keep in mind is, as I said, anything can be entity, but there are certain rules for being an entity, which means if you can add attributes to an entity, if you can define an entity with certain features in it, those objects can be called an entity. For example, we'll be discussing about attributes in the next slide. So for now, just understand that basically a noun. So for example, the person, an employee, and student, a patient, a user, they can be entity. Store, building, any place can be an entity. Machine, some registration, account, course, profile, anything can be entity. So let's move on. So before we dive into the attributes, again, let me grab my cup. So imagine. So what I said was, this is a cup. Now how would you define this cup? You would say a cup that's white in color, that has a cat in it, and that has a black rim at the top. So when you would say it's a cup, but its color is white, it has cat logo and black rim. So you defined an object into an entity. So while defining, what did you do? You added features so that anyone who is listening could recognize, oh, they're talking about this cup. So that's an attribute. So an attribute is a distinct characteristic, property, or data field that describes a specific entity, like what you did to the cup previously. So for example, if you need to define a user, what would be the attributes? It could be username, it could be password, it could be email. So you just defined an attribute for the specific entity. I hope right now you are clear with the concept of entity and attributes. Now, let's move on to relationships. Now, let me bring my cup again. So, now, if you want to tell someone that, oh, I'm talking about the cup that Caesar is holding. How would you say that? So, Caesar, as a person, I am an entity. This is an entity, the cup. And to define our attributes, what would be? Caesar, who is wearing glasses and holding a cup in her hand. And the cup is white in color and has cat logo in it. So what you did right now to explain the relation between me and this cup, you just established a connection, right? You're talking about person holding this cup. Anybody could be holding a cup, but to specify holding a specific cup by a specific person, you describe them. You establish the connection between them. And that's what a relationship does. When we need to establish connection between entities, that's when we define the relationship. And in ERD, we have different scenarios in which we define a relationship. So while defining the relationship, we have certain scenarios. So let's look around how this relationship work. For example, we have the first relationship, one-to-one. Name suggests one entity connects to exactly one another entity, like previously, person and cup. It was one-to-one. Now, second is one-to-many. So this means one entity can connect to multiple other entities. Now, for example, if we go into a restaurant, as a customer, I can order multiple items from the food menu. That means one person can order multiple food items. So that's one to many. The relationship between customer and the items from the menu. So it's one to many. So next we have many to one. It's just the opposite of one to many. It's like multiple entities all point back to one single entity. For example, if I go to a cafe and I want to order a coffee, the barista takes my order. Similarly, other person comes in. The same barista takes that person order. And the scenario repeats. What happens is multiple customer connection to one barista, because that one particular barista is serving at the cafe that day. So that is many to one. And we have many to many. So it's like we have multiple drinks, we have multiple customers, so multiple customers can order multiple drinks. Very simple, right? Now, I have an interesting perspective on this relationship. Okay, let's get back to the changey terms. So, let's imagine that you are in a relationship with a person, long commitment. That's your one-to-one. One person, long term. Now, for one-to-many, you can understand it something like situationship. That means you are the first person and you are talking with multiple other person. That means a single person can be talking to multiple different person. That's one-to-many. Now, for many-to-one, you can understand and remember it's like the relationship between fan and a particular idol. Let's say you are a fan of Jungkook. Okay, that means you are not the only one who is fan of Jungkook, right? There are multiple other person like you who is fan of your idol. So that's many to one. And many to many is like on a daily basis, you meet multiple people at multiple time and you're just hanging around. It's like many to many. I hope now you will remember the type of relationships. Now, moving on. So we have another term called cardinality. So it's like maximum number of times an entity can have a relationship with another entity. Okay, in simple terms, it's like either a person can have one relationship or multiple. Simple. So cardinality is either one or many. That means either you can be committed to one person for a long term, or you can be in talking stage forever until you meet the one. I hope now you'll remember cardinality as well. So moving on, we have ordinality. So it's like how many times can an entity participate with another entity? That means either it's mandatory or it's optional. The relationship is 0 or 1. That means, for example, we have Facebook, right? So just because Facebook exists, it does not mean that everyone should have a Facebook account. Either you can have a Facebook account or you cannot have. That's your ordinality. So either 0 or 1. So I hope you are following along until this moment. If you are, really good. Now we have a hands-on exercise. Now comment your answers down below for these terms. Now what you need to do is you need to identify the types of relationship along with modality for the entities. And modality means the cardinality and the ordinality. So what you need to do is you need to identify the type of relationship between employee and project, employee and training, country and capital, person and email. So I'll give you one example. So for employee and project, what it can have, an employee can be in one project or multiple projects or none of them. So in corporate world, it's not necessary that you are always assigned to the project. There's a term called bench, which means you are not assigned to any project. You are just working on yourself. So the type of relationship is employee to project can be one to many. And the cardinality can be one. And the ordinality can be optional because you can either be assigned on project or not. That means it's not necessary that an employee must be assigned to a project. So in this way, you need to write the types of relationship along with the modality for the remaining examples out here. I'll be replying to everyone, and don't worry, I'll be uploading these slides as well with the answers so that you can verify it later on. I'll be putting that in the description below. Now let's move on. Now it's the favorite part. So until now, what we did was we defined entity, we defined relationships, we also defined the modality. Modality means either cardinality or ordinality, right? Now we are designing the model, right? So that means we will be needing some notation, some kind of thing that will help us to know that, oh, okay, this is an ERD, right? Now, for example, to find out if a person is committed or not, you might notice the ring on the finger. What does this show? This shows that, that person is taken. So, similarly, crow's foot notation is a notation. It's a way of representing relationship between different tables, different entities in a database. It's the part of the ERD, and it shows how tables or how entities are connected to each other. So before I show you what kind of notation crow's foot have, remember, straight line, it represents the relationship between two entities. Crowfoot. Now remember, imagine what a crowfoot looks like, something like the forked shape, right? Yes, the forked line shows that how many connection does one entity have with another entity. And if you see a circle, that means optional. As previously, if you remember, the relationship between employee and project. An employee can be assigned in a project or not. It's optional, right? So in that case, what would we do? We would assign a 0 in the straight line. So that's the crowfoot notation for you. Let's move on and see how it looks like. Okay, so we have straight line which shows relationship, and this line shows 1. And we have this fork line, something like crow's feet, right? So this is called many. And if we have two lines, that means one is cardinality and one is ordinality. It represents one and only one. So if we have circle, it means it's optional, like the employee and project. So if here we'd have employee and this side we would have project, it would show that one employee can be assigned into one project or none. And in this case, an employee can be assigned to mandatory one or many projects. It's zero and many. So we will be looking more into depth while we design the database model itself. So I hope that you will be familiar with these lines and this circle. One, just a single stroke is one. The crowfoot is multiple. And if we see zero, the ordinality, it means optional. Just remember these three things. So, for example, this is what your ERD will be looking like at the end of the day. So, now, just the basic things. So, we defined entity, we understood the relationship, we understood the modality, and also we understood the different notation to represent the things that we learned. Now, there are simple rules that we need to keep in mind while we design our database. That is, we need to identify entities. So when we identify entities, we need to ensure that it has consistent terminology. For example, let's say you define the person to be user, right? So it needs to be consistent everywhere that, okay, the user means the person, the user means the person. You cannot go around and change in the system that user account means person, because we defined user to be person at the very first place. Then you need to define the attributes, then you need to identify keys, and then you need to define relationships. So I hope it's clear. Now, some hands-on exercise before we move on to the designing part. So, comment your answers below. Just simply what you need to do is you need to define the modality of this. So, employee and logger, we have two lines. As you can see, there are red lines that identify something, and we have the green light that identifies something. Now comment your answers down below. What does it actually mean? So an employee can have logger. If there is no employee, there is no logger. Now it's time to check how much did you understand of the modality. Comment down below, and as I mentioned earlier, I will leave the answers in the slide in the description below. But I really want you to try before you go and check the answers, and I'm not gonna give hint over here. Just try to understand what this relationships, what this modality is trying to show. Now, for a summary, entities, basically a noun, relationship, connection between the entities, and business logic, how the system enforces the rules. And where does the rules come from? It comes from the interviews, surveys, or anything like that. And this makes that the system must follow these rules, these policies, or these actions, or something like that. Now, finally, we are moving into the main part. Getting back to the point one. Imagine you are hired to design the core database for Netflix to manage user accounts, individual viewer profiles, video content, and viewing history more effectively. I'll walk you through the stakeholder interviews. From there, we'll be extracting business rules, we'll be writing business logic, we'll be defining entities, we'll be defining attributes for the entities, we will be finding a relationship between them, and finally we will be designing our ERD. So this contains the stakeholder interviews. Imagine that since you are going to design the Netflix database, you need to know what kind of system it is. You need to ask more questions. This is the particular stage where you need to be so proactive. So in the corporate world, when you start your journey, you might be facing some clients, you might be designing some system. This is the point where you need to communicate clearly. You need to communicate like a child. You need to ask questions, so that you'll have everything briefed out. You do not miss anything out. In case if you do, you need to revisit with your stakeholders, you need to discuss it, you need to show them, okay, this is what you meant and this is what we extracted. Is this correct? Validate with them and then only move forward with designing the system. Because for example, let's say you interviewed with your client, you interviewed with all your stakeholders, and you started designing business rules, you designing business requirements, and then you directly started designing your model. And let's say the client comes and says, this is not the thing that I said. Will you do it again? No. So before you go and get stuck in that loop, make sure that once you have your business logic, business rules, everything exposed out there, written, brainstorm, validate it with your clients, validate it with your seniors, validate with all the related person that is supposed to be the part of your team. Now, so we have the interviews with our product manager, we have account administrator. For the user's perspective, we have the lead IT architect for the scalability and future proofing. Now what you need to do is you need to list the entities involved, you need to identify attributes, you need to extract business rule, you need to identify relationship, cardinalities, and modalities. Okay, so I've copied it here. Let's use it. Okay, is it clear on the screen? Yes. Okay, so what we've got, so we've got that the platform offers thousands of movies. Let me choose different color. Okay, so the platform offers thousands of movies to watch. Okay, each movie belongs to at least one genre. Here's one thing, there's a rule over here, but it can belong to multiple genres. That means a movie needs to have at least one, so it cannot be empty. And it can belong to multiple genres. That means it's mandatory one and many. And what we have to prevent family members from messing up each other's recommendation, a single user account can create up to 5 individual profiles. It's like the family plan kind of thing. Okay, so that means a user can have multiple accounts, and multiple is like our 5 accounts. And what it says each profile needs to have its own personalized watch history. Why watch history? So that it can track which movies they watch and exactly when. Okay, so did you get the idea of business rules over here? Each movie belongs to at least one genre, can have multiple genres. A single user account can create up to 5 individual profiles. Each profile needs to have its own personalized watch history. That means it needs to own watch history. Okay. Now let's move on to lead architect. Let's choose another color. So interview with lead architect. So what it says, the system must allow future expansions such as tracking, TV shows, episodes, Caesar. Okay. A single profile should only generate one unique watch history per movie per viewing session. That means a profile needs to have its own individual viewing history. And we may eventually support offline downloads and regional content licensing restrictions. So it's for the future use case. So we don't have much over here, the rules. Let's go with the account administrator. What does it want? Okay. It says we need to store user account information, especially unique user IDs, email addresses, and secure passwords. Okay, so for profiles, we need to track a profile ID, a profile name, and an avatar URL. Okay, so for movies, we must store a unique movie ID, the title, the release year, and the total running duration. The system should allow us to generate watch time reports, maybe it's used for future analysis purpose, and to see what content is actually trending. So the way that you get your recommendation is from basically what you watch, how much time do you watch. So did you get the idea on what it wants? Now what our thing was to do, we needed to list the entities involved. Now look carefully, where are we talking about entities? Where is it speaking about who is basically using the system? What kind of things they are doing in the system? Yes, it's in the account administrator. So we need to store user account information. That means first entity is user. And what it says for profiles, we need to track profile ID. That means we have attributes for profile over here. So profile is our next entity. And then we have movies. Why movie? Because we also have attributes for movie. What it is? Unique movie ID, release year, total duration time. Anything else do we have here? And we have our business rules over with product manager, because they actually know what kind of product they want. So they are the one who is trying to enforce some business rules over here. So the platform, okay, let's get back to the docs and let's write it out. I've already written a few. Okay, so the entity can be user account, it can be profile, it can be movie, it can be genre. So why genre? Comment down below, because I did answer it while I was explaining on why are these the entities for this model. And the watch history entry. Now for identifying attributes. So how did I identify the attributes? So if we go back to here, it's already defined over here. User account information needs to have user IDs, email addresses, secure passwords. Profile must need profile ID, profile name, and avatar URL. So everything is listed in all the information that we get from the client. That's why it's very, very important step while having the interview or while you are conducting any survey to have as many questions as possible. Because look at the moment, because of these interviews that we have had, we are able to design a system. We are able to brainstorm on what the entities are, what are its attributes, right? And even we are getting an idea on what kind of relationship does these entities have. Let's move on in the attributes. For user, it has user, it needs unique ID. It has mentioned there, and always the unique ID are mentioned from the primary keys. If you want explanation or idea on keys, let me know so that I can cover it in the next video, just dedicated to the keys and the attributes. And for the profile, we have profile ID, profile name, and we also had the avatar. You can add over here an avatar URL. So now for the profile, we have profile ID, as it mentioned earlier that it needs to be unique. That's why we have this as primary key. We need profile name, and it also mentioned something. What it was? It was avatar URL. So for movie, we have movie ID, title, release year, and also we had one more thing. List it down yourself. And for genre, we can have genre ID, genre name. Where did it come from? Yes, it came from the interview with the product manager. And what about the watch history? It came from comment down below. So now for the business rules. So I highlighted all the business rules parts. So it was a single user account can have maximum of 5 individual profiles. A single user account must at least have one profile. Each movie must belong to at least one genre, but can belong to multiple genres. Each profile has its own isolated watch history to keep recommendation clean. A profile can generate only one unique entry per viewing session in the watch history. Clear, right? Now it comes to the relationship. Did you get an idea where this relationship came from? Yes. Most of them were defined in the product manager interview part, which was user to account profile. So it was one user hosts multiple profiles. So cardinality is one, and modality is the ordinality is many. Why? Because a user can have one or multiple. That means a user can have one user can have 5, up to maximum 5 profiles. And a profile must belong to exactly one user. It cannot exist standalone. Either you do not have an account, but if you have account, that account belongs to just one user. It's unique. Profile to watch history. One profile generates multiple watch history record, but a watch history must link to one specific profile. Why? Because to generate watch time reports to see what content is trending. And for a movie to watch history entry, it has one movie can appear on multiple watch history record. There is no basically that this movie needs to be just dedicated to this account. Maybe you like same genre and same movies can be suggested to you, right? And movie and watch history, just because I've created an account does not mean I watch movie. If I don't watch movie, I won't have any watch history. So a newly released movie might have 0 views because it's not necessary that it's released today, it needs to be watched today. As a user, I can watch tomorrow if I'm new to the system. The movie is new to the system. And a watch history must link back to exactly one specific movie for one specific profile. So these are some of the relationship, cardinalities, and modalities. Now it's time for adding crow foot notation based on what we identified. We identified entities, we identified relationship, we also defined modalities, cardinalities. Now we have a clear concept on what are the things. We brainstormed, we step by step analyzed the interviews, we re-studied the interviews. Now we are moving to the final stage. Here I showed you a potential diagram what your crow foot notation when implemented can look like. I designed one. Aha! So this is our final ERD. Are you able to see? Okay. Let's go one by one. Okay, let's start with one by one. So for our first entity for the user, I kept the name as user account. It's our entity. Okay. And what do we have here? We have a relationship. And what's missing in this relationship? Now, look closely. So it's relationship between user and profile. So what our business rule said, a user can have one profile or multiple profiles, because a user can have at least 5 profiles. And in a system, when user creates an account, at least to have multiple accounts or profiles, user must have one, mandatory one user account, right? And what do you think it's missing on this side? Yes, we don't have the ordinality here. We did say that user must have one account, one profile or multiple profile, but we did not show it in the notation. So we need to add. Okay, is it clear? I don't think so. I think because of the dark mode, we cannot see this. So right now we have defined this. Similarly, the relationship between profile and watch history. As I mentioned earlier, just because you created a profile does not mean you are watching movie. It can just remain as it is, right? That means you'll have no watch history because you did not watch any movie. So that's why it's optional. But if you're watching movie, that means your profile can have multiple movies inside the watch history. The same goes with the movie and the watch history. And we have genre, we have movie genre. Now, did you see something new in this ERD? Yes, is this movie genre. Where did it came from? If you know what this movie genre is doing over here, comment down below. And if you do not know, comment down below. I'll be covering it in the next video. Now, what we generally call this table is, we call this the linking table. That means when we have many-to-many relationship, a lot of problems can come in the modeling when we query using the database that we design. To prevent from these problems, these traps, we add linking tables, especially in the case of many-to-many relationships. That's why we have this linking table for movie and genre. Think for a moment what it does, how it helps. So this is all. Now you can successfully design the ERD on yourself. First of all, congratulations on creating your first ERD. So tell me honestly, are you happy with your design? Do you see any problem in your design? If yes, comment down below. If no, well, that's okay. That's good. But are you satisfied with the design that you did? If not, what would be the changes that you would do in this ERD? Like, what would you actually add or subtract, or whatever modification that you want to do? What would be that? Think for a second and comment down below. Now, we have a lot of steps after this step. Just we designed a draft. It needs a lot of advanced techniques involved, like normalization is still remaining. We are yet to identify traps over here. We are yet to add more attributes, more relationship. We need to validate it with all the rules that we created, whether or not it follows the actual system that we wanted to design, and so on. For now, that's a wrap on our Netflix ERD design. Starting from stakeholder interviews, we identify business requirements, translated them into entities, attributes, relationships, and gradually we build a complete ERD step by step, right? So if you're a beginner, I encourage you to not stop here. Take another real-world application, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, or just a basic university management system, and try designing it yourself. Or you can just go to the section where I define the premise and then start designing yourself. I'll be sharing this document as well in the comment section, and you can design it on your own. Maybe you will find more rules which I missed, or you'll find new ways of defining relationship based on the system that you are trying to design. Anything. The system belongs to you. You are the one who is the creator. So feel free to explore more, to add more, to remove something. Remember, ERD design is not about memorizing symbols or drawing boxes. It's about understanding a business problem and translating that understanding into structured data model. So if you found this video helpful, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps me for creating more content. It acts as the fuel of motivation, the fuel for courage to design in-depth content like this. Also, let me know in the comments what system you'd like us to model next. I'd love to design it together with you guys step by step. And do not forget to leave some comments, some feedbacks on how can I improve more on my future videos. Thank you so much for watching. This is Isa, the Data AI Engineer, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye-bye.